Today, we will be looking at 3 films, all made by women in the 21st century. Each film takes place in a different non-Western country, and each story has underlying feminist themes. Before we examine these films, we should note the driving question behind our research. Is there such a thing as a universal women's experience? By this, we mean, are women similarly oppressed across the world? What does patriarchy look like in a non-Western setting? What are the similarities and differences in the ways women are treated and accepted in their respective societies? To answer these questions, we are looking at these 3 films. The first, Fish and Elephant, is a 2001 Chinese film by director Li Yu. Noted as the first depiction of a lesbian relationship in Chinese cinema, it portrays the taboo subject of homosexuality in China. Chun, a zookeeper at the Beijing Zoo, rejects her mother's constant attempts at finding her a husband. When she meets Ling, it is love at first sight. Chun and Ling struggle to navigate their life together while rejecting heteronormative expectations in their traditional Chinese society. The second film, Traveling with Pets, is a 2007 Russian film by Vera Storasheva. Natalia, an orphan child bride, lives by the railroad tracks in rural Russia with her husband. When he suddenly dies, Natalia comes to terms with her newfound freedom and what it means to have independence and agency in a society that stresses traditional gender roles like marriage. The final film we will examine is Maïsoulin Hamoud's 2016 Palestinian film, In Between. 2 Palestinian girls, Layla and Salma, live and work in the Israeli city of Tel Aviv. When Layla's devout Muslim cousin, Noor, comes to live with them while she goes to university, the 3 must grapple with balancing their traditional Palestinian roots and the modernity of city life in Israel. In our examination of these films, we can see that there are many commonalities between the cultures in each film. We can acknowledge that all 3 of these films are pure fiction, but the director's critiques of their societies through these stories are obvious. Therefore, we can assume each story has elements of truth and contains themes that can be applied to any woman's life. This is the main point of women's cinema. The filmmakers tell stories for women, about women, by women. There are a few main themes that are apparent across all 3 films. In each film, the characters experience the following. They fight with tradition and embrace modernity and independence. They crave acceptance, but reject the patriarchal structures that they would otherwise find it in. They find and create acceptance within themselves and their communities. They overcome personal struggles while finding meaning in their own lives. In each of these films, we see our characters embrace their independence despite the social stigma that it might bring. In Palestine's In Between, Layla and Salma are defined by their independence. They take advantage of the lack of structure in their lives, partying in Tel Aviv, flitting from job to job, and rarely committing to a serious relationship. However, this type of freedom comes with consequences like rejection and heartbreak. Layla's cousin Noor resents this kind of independence and commits to her studies and religious practices. At first, she simply doesn't want to pay the price of modern freedom. When her courtship with Wissam turns violent, she is embraced by the modern girls and realizes that there might be consequences to being pious, too. In China's Fish and Elephant, Chun and Ling choose to be honest about their sexualities in a society where homosexuality is a taboo subject. Chun comes out to her family and acquaintances several times throughout the movie, never expressing shame or unease about her sexuality. She also rejects her mother's constant attempts to find her a husband, going against the Chinese expectation of gender, marriage, and family.
那我告诉你，我对男人不感兴趣，我喜欢的是女人。
什么？不会吧？那这种人很少吧？我好像还没碰到过呢。那你是什么性格的？
At At the beginning of this film, we see Natalia dressed in drab, old-fashioned clothing. She milks her cow and puts up with her brutish husband, who she calls master. Later, we find out that Natalia grew up at an orphanage and was sold at the age of 13 to this man. She never had children, and she spent her days serving him and helping with his dairy business by the railroad tracks. After he literally drops dead one day, she dresses a scarecrow up in his clothes and burns all of his belongings. In a symbol of liberation from menial household duties and servitude, the burning scarecrow literally represents her deliverance from patriarchal expectations. This idea that Natalia can create her own kind of family and find her own kind of happiness gives her a sense of independence she has never experienced before. Later, when Sergei suggests they get married and buy another cow, Natalia's new lifestyle is threatened and she lashes out. Her rejection of Sergei is based in fear. She craves love and she wants a child, but she doesn't want to be bound by the constraints of marriage and a relationship. In a sudden epiphany, she rows herself, her goat, and her dog in a canoe to the orphanage where she grew up. She adopts a child with red hair like her and takes him back home to start a new life. Pilkington and Rutledge discuss gender expectations in Russian society. Typically, men take on the masculine role of breadwinner, while women are expected to serve their families through domestic duties. Any deviation from this can create tension. Society forces upon men and women alike a traditional system of sex role behavior. Any retreat from these normative codes, strengthened in culture and in ethno-social identity, leads the individual into conflict with society on a deep psychological level of consciousness. Natalia's rejection of her old lifestyle serves as an act of defiance against Sergei, against her late husband, and against the patriarchal structures in her society that expect her to live by their traditions. Natalia does not want to be owned. The need to belong is defined as the desire to form and maintain close, lasting relationships with some other individuals. The need to belong has two parts. First, people want some kind of positive, regular social contact. Second, people want the stable framework of some ongoing relationship in which the individuals share a mutual concern for each other. Having either of these without the other provides only partial satisfaction of the need to belong. The women in these films risk rejection from people due to their beliefs, thoughts, and identities, and yet they still crave acceptance. In Traveling with Pets, Natalia longs to be a mother. She wants love, but not the kind where she feels obligated to serve a man. Instead, she finds love and acceptance in taking care of her own pets and adopting a child from the orphanage. After her master dies, she creates her own happiness and sense of belonging. In Between, Noor likes to stick to her traditional Palestinian roots. When she is attacked by her fiancé, she finds solace in her loving roommates. She also fears her father will shun her for adopting a more modern lifestyle and canceling her wedding. Luckily, her father accepts her and loves her no matter what. Alternatively, when Salma's parents find out she is gay, they forbid her lifestyle and shun her. Here, we can see that conforming to tradition does not always indicate a lack of acceptance, and vice versa. It is two sides of the same story and totally subverts the audience's expectations. We will further examine this later. Fish and Elephant was widely criticized in China upon its release, but did exceptionally well in international markets. Our main protagonist, Chun, is openly gay, but still explains her sexuality to almost every character she meets. This indicates the low level of queer visibility in China, as seen here.
我对男人没有感觉。
你对男人没感觉，你对什么有感觉？我看你是有病啊，要不要给你找个大夫啊？哎，我就是不理解，小泉，你说你吧，长得也挺漂亮，不缺胳膊不缺腿的，你怎么着就对人没感觉了？哎，你脑袋瓜里都装些什么呀？
As we can see, Chun literally must explain the reason behind her sexuality every time she comes out. Jen Marie Nunez writes in her examination of the film, up until the early 20th century, Female-female love in China was almost exclusively represented as emotional attachment between sisters or close friends. In other words, the patriarchal familial organizations of traditional China were so strong that lesbian love was essentially inconceivable. Chun generally doesn't care what other people think of her sexuality. However, Chun doesn't want her mother to be sad or disappointed that she will never marry. Because of this, she goes along with her mother's plans to find her a husband and calls her relationship with Ling a close friendship. Finally, when Chun realizes she wants to be with Ling long term, she comes out to her mother. It is a risky decision that may lead to rejection or abandonment. Of all the people in her life, her mother matters the most to her.
我也有一件事情要告诉你。
你说吧。
我喜欢的是女人，不是男人。
亲爱。
Although her mother doesn't understand at first, Chun gets a call later that reveals that her mother will love and accept her no matter what. This revelation is the best case scenario for Chun and is contrasted by the tragedy that occurs to Chun's ex-girlfriend at the end of the film. The triumph of one queer character is juxtaposed with the demise of another in a clear message that Chinese society still has big steps to take in terms of queer visibility. This erasure of homosexuality in China appeals to the patriarchal expectations of heterosexual marriage. As Nunez puts it, queer women have but two choices: appeal to the dominant culture as normal in order to be included in the pre-existing hetero/homonormative framework, or languish in a shameful twilight of erasure. This is why Chun and Ling's openness about their sexualities is an act of defiance against the patriarchy in itself. They demand to be acknowledged, visible, and out in a society that had historically refused to understand them. Despite the risk of societal rejection, Chun creates her own kind of family and finds acceptance in those she loves. We've discussed the difficult life circumstances our characters overcame in these three films. Natalia dealt with the death of her husband and starting a new life of her own. Chun and Ling fought for acceptance and visibility in a society where people struggled to understand what homosexuality even means. However, Palestine's In-Between features the most strong-willed, resilient characters of all the three films. They all overcome personal struggles and fight to find meaning and purpose in their lives. In this film, the three main characters, Layla, Salma, and Noor, are Arabs living in Tel Aviv. They are the minority and face discrimination and bigotry from Jewish Israelis on top of their own personal problems. Each character struggles to remain true to herself without feeling like she abandoned or disappointed her family, herself, or her tradition. Layla loves to party in the city at night and works as a defense attorney during the day. She never takes relationships too seriously because she wants to remain independent and free. She loves the autonomy she has over her life. She does not have to meet anyone else's expectations but her own. Her lifestyle as a free-thinking, educated, professional woman asserts itself above the domestic expectations of her Palestinian roots. She knows who she is, a modern woman of the 21st century, undefined by traditional roles and expectations. When she meets Ziad, a well-traveled, liberal-minded man, she thinks about letting herself fall in love and settle down. Layla is heartbroken when Ziad tries to change her to conform to how a good girl should be. She knows she can't be happy with someone who will prevent her from being her authentic self. Ziad betrays the idea of the perfect man, and it is a harsh wake-up call for Layla. It is through Ziad that Layla realizes there is no such thing as a perfect man, and she can't live her life for someone else. Layla rejects the Hollywood notion of true love and continues to live her life for herself. Salma is a freelance DJ and goes from day job to day job. It seems she is trying to find meaning and purpose in her life, but nothing fulfills her more than her nighttime social life. She is openly gay in Tel Aviv, but remains closeted around her parents, who set her up on dates hoping she'll find a husband. When Salma meets a doctor at the bar she tends at, Salma feels happy and fulfilled. Salma brings Dunya to her parents' house in Palestine and pretends she is only a friend. When her parents catch Salma and Dunya kissing, they are outraged and send Dunya away. Although Salma is a legal adult, her parents treat her like a child. They shout at her, hit her, and send her to her room. In this scene, we see Salma lose all the agency, dignity, and confidence she had gained from her free life in the city. We can see a parallel between Salma's story and Chun's in Fish and Elephant. Both characters come out to their parents, and we see the difference in reactions of the parents who hope to find their daughters a husband. Neither parents respond particularly well at the beginning, but Chun's mother decides she can accept her daughter. With Salma, the film concludes without her knowing if her parents will accept her. It's scary and alienating, but at least both characters are now open about their personal truths. Noor is first introduced as a conservative, religious, and studious girl. She is horrified at the loose lifestyle of her two roommates and works hard to remain true to her faith and subservient to her fiancé, Wissam. Although she studies computer science at Tel Aviv University, her fiancé urges her to drop out because once they marry, he insists Noor will never work again anyway. Instead, she will stay home, tend to the house, and raise the next generation of Muslim children. Noor feels guilty when she thinks about having more freedom. After Wissam rapes her, Noor knows she can't stay with him. She worries she will have to choose between her religion, which includes her family and her reputation, and the modern life her roommates live. In the end, Noor realizes she doesn't have to be stuck in between. She can keep the family that she loves, she can believe in Allah, and she can have a fulfilling professional career. In the process, she rejects old patriarchal beliefs and picks up new values that will move her forward more than Wissam ever could have. Noor's story carries an inspiring message that resonated with audiences worldwide. Noor overcomes great personal challenges and shows us that women, no matter where they come from, are resilient, brave, and strong. So, is there such a thing as a universal women's experience? According to these films and our research, we can determine that all women are different. So no, there is probably not one experience we can point to and claim to be universal. However, we have learned through these films that many women share similar stories, experiences, and hardships. We can see the similarity between Palestine's Salma and China's Chun. Both women's families urge them to marry, but neither has an interest in men. This creates conflict and confusion in their lives, which we see in all the other characters as well. We can acknowledge that every woman has a unique story, no matter where she's from. Filmmakers tell some of these stories in hopes that the audience will see and relate to them. These stories from Russia, China, and Palestine are meant to inspire, encourage, and acknowledge women's experiences. More importantly, feminist filmmakers want to remind their audiences that while every woman's experience is unique, there is absolutely such a thing as universal women's resilience. In other words, all women crave and deserve independence. All women will seek and create their own communities of acceptance. All women are resilient in times of hardship. Each of these films is empowering in its own right, if not simply because they are told about women, for women, by women. The combined experiences of our characters conclude that every woman, no matter where she lives, has the power to resist societal expectations if she chooses to do so. These stories tell us that, especially in increasing modern and progressive societies, women can defy patriarchal influences, reject outdated norms, and come to our own conclusions about our lives and existence in society. Our characters ultimately show us how cool, diverse, and strong women can be, all over the world or right here at home.